It is neither dharma nor is it not the dharma. Why is this? Because advanced practitioners differ in their accounts of the eternalist dharma. Real merit has no merit. What do you think, Subhuti? Buddha asked. If someone filled 1,000,000,000 worlds with the 7 treasures and gave them away in charity, would his merit be great? Subhuti replied, yes, world-honored one, it is because the nature of merit is not merit that the Tathagata is able to speak about merit. Then Buddha said, if someone understands and passes on even 4 lines of this sutra to another, his merit is even greater than that of the giver of treasure. Why? Subhuti, all of the Buddhas and all of their teachings of supreme enlightenment spring forth from this sutra. But Subhuti, that which are called the Buddhas and the Buddha Dharma are not.
Well, I mean, it's still like just your opinion.
Real Buddhas and Dharmas. Therefore, lesser vehicle realizations. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Srota Apanna, one who has entered the stream, have this thought in his mind? I have obtained the fruit of entering the stream. Subhuti replied, no, world-honored one, why? Because Srota Apanna means entering the stream, but actually there is no stream to be entered. There is no entry into either form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or dharma. Therefore he is called Srota Apanna. Subhuti, what do you think? Can a Sakritagamin, one who is subject to only one more rebirth, say to himself, I have obtained the fruit of a Sakritagamin? Subhuti replied, no, world-honored one, why? Because Sakritagamin means once more to come, but actually there is neither coming nor going. Therefore he is called a Sakritagamin. Subhuti, what do you think? Does a venerable one who is a Nagamin, one who will never more be reborn as a mortal, say to himself, I have attained the realization of an Anagamin? Subhuti replied, no, world-honored one, why? Because Anagamin means non-returning, but there is in fact no such thing as returning or non-returning. Therefore he is called an Anagamin. Subhuti, what do you think? Does an Arhat say within himself, I have obtained the perfect enlightenment of an Arhat? Subhuti replied, no, world-honored one, why? Because there is no dharma which is called arhatship, world-honored one. If an arhat thinks I have obtained the enlightenment of an arhat, he will still grasp and hold on to the notion of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life. World-honored one, you have said that I am the most proficient in terms of the attainment of the passionless samadhi. and that I am the Arhat most free from the desire, but I do not give rise to the thought that I am an Arhat who is free from desire. World-honored one, if I were to give rise to the thought that I have attained the level of the Arhat, then you would not have said of me that I enjoy the practice of forest dwelling, since there is in actuality nothing for me to practice. Therefore I am called Subhuti, the one who enjoys the practice of forest.
Device and simply present a monologue by Hermes addressed to the reader. Although we have used the familiar term God in the explanatory notes which accompany each chapter, we have avoided this term in the text itself. Instead, we have used Atom, one of the ancient Egyptian names for the supreme one God. We felt that using this unfamiliar Egyptian
Dwelling, arousing the pure aspiration without abiding. The Buddha said to Subhuti, Subhuti, what do you think? In ancient times when the Tathagata practiced under Dipankara Buddha, did he gain any attainment in the Dharma? No, world-honored one, in ancient times when the Tathagata was practiced under Buddha Dipankara, he did not attain anything. What do you think Subhuti does? A Bodhisattva creates sublime Buddha lands? No, he does not, world-honored one. Why? Sublime Buddha lands are not sublime, therefore they are called sublime. Subhuti, this is why all bodhisattvas and mahasattvas should thus develop a pure and clean mind, which should not abide in form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and dharma. They should develop a mind which does not abide in anything. Subhuti, it is like if there were a person with a body as large as Mount Sumeru. What do you think? Would this body not be great? Very great, world-honored one. Why? Because the Buddha says it is not the real body, but is merely called a great body. Merits of memorizing this sutra. Subhuti, if each of the sands in the Ganges River contained its own Ganges River, would not the number of sands contained in all those Ganges rivers be great? Subhuti replied, very great, world-honored one. These rivers would be innumerable, how much more so would be their sand grains? Subhuti, now I am going to tell you a truth. If a virtuous man or woman filled 3,000 galaxies with the 7 jewels equal to the number of grains of sand in all those Ganges rivers and gave them away charitably, would his or her merit not be great? Subhuti replied, extremely great world-honored one. The Buddha said to Subhuti, if a virtuous man or woman receives and memorizes even 4 lines of this sutra and expounds them to others, his or her merit will be even greater than this psalm's giver. Furthermore, Subhuti, any plot of land on which this sutra is proclaimed, even if only 1 verse of 4 lines, will be a land where gods, men, and asuras will come to make offerings, just as they make offerings to a shrine of the Buddha. If the plot of land is regarded as that sacred, how much more so the person who practices and recites this sutra? Subhuti, you should know that this person attains something most rare and profound. Wherever the sutra is kept is a sacred site enshrining the presence of the Buddha or one of the Buddha's great disciples. Naming of the sutra. Subhuti then asked the Buddha, world-honored one, what name should be given to this sutra, and how should we receive and hold its teachings? The Buddha replied, this sutra should be called the Diamond Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, because it has the capacity to cut through illusions and bring us to the shore of liberation. This is how you should receive and hold it. Why? Because that which the Buddha calls wisdom is not wisdom. Subhuti, what does this mean? Does the Tathagata have a teaching to explain? Subhuti replied, world-honored one, the Tathagata has no teaching to explain. Subhuti, what do you think? Are there many particles of dust contained in the universe? Subhuti replied, many, world-honored one. Subhuti, the Tathagata teaches that these particles of dust are not real but are merely called particles of dust. The Tathagata teaches that the universe is not real but is merely called the universe. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be discerned by means of his 32 physical characteristics? No, world-honored one, he cannot. Why? Because the 32 bodily characteristics that are taught by the Tathagata are in fact not real. Therefore, they are called the 32 physical characteristics. Subhuti, if on the one hand a virtuous man or woman dedicates lifetimes as numerous as the sands in the Ganges River to charitable acts, and there were another person who memorized as much as a 4-line verse of the scripture and taught it to others, the merit of the latter person would be by far greater. True characteristics are not characteristics. Then Subhuti, having heard this sutra, deeply understood its profound meaning and was moved to tears. He said to the Buddha, how rare, O world-honored one, the Buddha has expounded such a very profound sutra. Since I acquired the eye of special insight, I have never heard of such a teaching. World-honored one, if someone after listening to the sutra believes that his mind is clean and pure, he will realize reality. We should know that such a person will achieve the highest and rarest merit. World-honored one, this reality is not reality, but the Tathagata calls it reality. World-honored one, as I now listen to this sutra, I have no difficulty in believing, understanding, receiving, and holding it. But in 500 years' time, a person who hears this sutra and understands it, comprehends it, and embraces it as I do will be very rare. Why? Because he will no longer think in terms of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life. Why? Because the forms of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life are not real. Why? Because when he has rejected all forms as real, he is called a Buddha. The Buddha said, just so, Subhuti, just so. If someone hears this sutra and is not terrified or afraid, he or she is rare. Why? Subhuti, what the Tathagata calls the greatest transcendence, is not the greatest transcendence. Therefore, it is called the greatest transcendence. Subhuti, what is called transcendent endurance is not transcendent endurance. That is why it is called transcendent endurance. Why? Subhuti, thousands of lifetimes ago, when my body was cut into pieces by King Kalinga, I was not caught in the notion of a self, a person, a being, or a life. If I had been holding to the notions of a self, a person, a being, or a life, I would have felt anger and hatred toward Kalinga. But for 500 lives I have been a renunciant sage, suffused with patience, having no sense of self, no concept of person or being or life. Therefore, Subhuti Bodhisattvas should leave behind all distinctions of appearance as real, and awaken the thought of supreme enlightenment by not allowing the mind to abide in sounds, odors, flavors, sensations of touch, or any other qualities. Their minds should abide nowhere. If minds abide somewhere, it will be in falsehood. This is why the Buddha says that the Bodhisattva's minds should not abide taking form as real when practicing charity. Subhuti, when a Bodhisattva wants to make offerings to benefit all sentient beings, he or she should practice charity like this. I teach that all forms are not forms. I also teach that all sentient beings are not sentient beings. Subhuti, my words are true and correspond to reality. My words are neither deceitful nor erroneous. Subhuti, the dharma that I have attained is neither real nor unreal. Subhuti, if a bodhisattva practices charity while abiding in forms as real, then it is like a person in the dark who cannot see anything. If a bodhisattva practices charity while not abiding in forms as real, it is like a person with eyes wide open in the sunlight who sees everything in the bright light. Subhuti, if in a future time there are practitioners who are able to memorize the scripture and recite it, Then I will with my Buddha wisdom be fully aware of them, seeing each attain limitless merit. The sutra is not for lesser vehicle practitioners. Subhuti, if a virtuous man or woman sacrifices in the practice of charity as many lives as the sand grains of the Ganges, in the morning, at midday, and again in the evening, and continues so doing throughout numberless aeons. And if on the other hand a person after listening to this sutra believes it in his own mind without further contradiction, the latter's merit will surpass that of the former. How much more so if this sutra is written, received, held, read, recited, and expounded to others. Subhuti, to sum up, the merits resulting from this sutra are inconceivable, inestimable, and without limit. The Tathagata expounds it to those initiated into the Mahayana and the Supreme Yana. If they are able to receive, retain, read, and recite it, and expound it widely to others, the Tathagata will know and will see that they will achieve inexpressible and inconceivable merits that are without measure or limit. They will bear responsibility for the Tathagata's supreme enlightenment. Why? Because Subhuti, those who take delight in the Hinayana and hold the view of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life, cannot listen to, receive, retain, read, and recite the sutra and explain it to others. Subhuti, wheresoever this sutra may be found, all worlds of devas, men, and asuras should make offerings. For you should know that such a place is just a stupa, which should be revered, worshipped, and circumambulated with offerings of flowers and incense. Purgation through suffering of bad karma. Furthermore, Subhuti, if a virtuous man or woman receives, retains, reads, and recites this sutra and is despised by others, this person who is bound to suffer from evil destinies and retribution for his past sins, and whose karmic sins are now eradicated by the other's contempt, will attain supreme enlightenment. Subhuti, I remember that in the past countless aeons before the advent of Dipankara Buddha, I met 84,000 billions of Buddhas to whom I made offerings and whom I serve faultlessly. Now, if in the last period in the Buddha Kalpa someone is able to receive, retain, read, and recite this sutra, his merits will far exceed mine, which resulted from my offering made to Buddhas. For mine cannot be reckoned as 100th, 1,000th, 1/10,000th, or 100,000th part thereof. In fact, no computation or comparison is possible. Subhuti, in the last period of the Buddha Kalpa, if a virtuous man or woman is able to receive, retain, read, and recite this sutra, my full statement of this person's merits will create derangement, doubt, and disbelief in the minds of all listeners. Subhuti, you should know that as the meaning of this sutra is inconceivable, so is the fruit of its reward. Defining the Bodhisattva, at the time Subhuti asked the Buddha, world-honored one, if a virtuous man or woman is determined to develop the supreme enlightened mind, how should his or her mind abide, and how should it be subdued? The Buddha said to Subhuti, a virtuous man or woman who is determined to develop the supreme enlightened mind should thus develop it. I have to lead all living beings to put a stop to rebirth and escape suffering. And when they have been so led, not one of them in fact stops reincarnating or escapes suffering. Why? Because Subhuti, if a bodhisattva clings to the notion of an ego, a personality, a being, and a life, he is not a true bodhisattva. Why? Because Subhuti, there is not really a dharma which can develop the supreme enlightenment mind. Subhuti, what do you think? When the Tathagata was with the Pankara Buddha, did he have any dharma by means of which he attained supreme enlightenment? No, world-honored one, as I understand the meaning of the Buddha's teaching. When he was with Dipankara Buddha, he had no dharma by means of which he attained supreme enlightenment. The Buddha said, just so, Subhuti, just so. There was really no dharma by means of which the Tathagata attained supreme enlightenment. Subhuti, if there had been Dipankara, Buddha would not have predicted in your next life you will be a Buddha named Sakyamuni. Why is it? Because Tathagata means the suchness of all dharmas. If someone still says the Tathagata obtained supreme enlightenment, I tell you, Subhuti, there is no dharma by means of which the Buddha did so, because Subhuti, that enlightenment was by itself neither real nor unreal. This is why the Tathagata says that all dharmas are Buddha's dharmas. Subhuti, these so-called dharmas are not, but are expediently called all dharmas. Subhuti, supposing there is a man whose body is great, world-honored one, the great body of which the Tathagata speaks is not great, but is expediently called a great body. Subhuti, in like manner, if a bodhisattva says, I should lead uncountable living beings to put a stop to rebirth and escape from suffering, he cannot be called a bodhisattva. Why? Because there is really no dharma called the bodhisattva stage. Therefore the Buddha says of all dharmas there is not a single one which possesses an ego, a personality, a being.
Phoenix Grand Rising.
Subhuti, if a bodhisattva says,
Jefferson, how are you? Hope you all have a wonderful time.
Boy, Shaloi, what are you doing?
I'm at work right now.
You're at work?
Yeah, I working.
It's the Lord's Day.
It's actually I'm
Why?
Muslim, so
Because when the Tathagata speaks of such adornment, it is not what is expediently called adornment. Subhuti, if a bodhisattva is thoroughly versed in the doctrine of the unreality of ego and of all things, the Tathagata will call him a true bodhisattva. Physical and mental faculties are unobtainable. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess human eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses human eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess Eva eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses Deva eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess wisdom eyes? Yes, world-honored one, the Tathagata possesses wisdom eyes. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Tathagata possess karma eyes?
Why do we give Kurbani each year? Giving Kurbani is not only...
Even though a speech be 1,000 of words, but made up of senseless words, one word of sense is better, which if a man hears, he becomes quiet. Even though a gatha poem be 1,000 of words, but made up of senseless words, one word of a gatha is better, which if a man hears, he becomes quiet. Though a man recite 100 gathas made up of senseless words, one word of the law is better, which if a man hears, he becomes quiet. If one man conquer in a battle 1,000 times 1,000 men, and if another conquer himself, he is the greatest of conquerors. One's own self conquered is better than all other people. Not even a god, a Gandharva, not Mara with Brahman, could change into defeat the victory of a man who has vanquished himself and always lives under restraint. If a man for 100 years sacrifice month after month with 1,000, and if he, but for one moment, pay homage to a man whose soul is grounded in true knowledge, better is that homage than sacrifice for 100 years. If a man for 100 years worship Agni, fire, in the forest, and if he but for one moment pay homage to a man whose soul is grounded in true knowledge, better is that homage than sacrifice for 100 years. Whatever a man sacrifice in this world as an offering, or as an oblation for a whole year in order to gain merit, the whole of it is not worth a quarter, a farthing. Reverence shown to the righteous is better. He who always greets and constantly reveres the aged, 4 things will increase to him: life, beauty, happiness, power. But he who lives 100 years, vicious and unrestrained, a life of 1 day is better if a man is virtuous and reflecting. And he who lives 100 years, ignorant and unrestrained, a life of 1 day is better if a man is